Hey everybody, my name's Darryl Robert. Welcome back to Journey to VR. For my Friday favorite post this week, I wanted to share with you a couple different ways to get animation data from Maya to Unreal, specifically data that's been animated using the motion graphics toolset. So let's hop into Maya and check it out now. Cheers. All right, so here we are inside of Maya, and the first thing I need to do is get my Journey to VR animated using the motion graphics toolset. So we'll select all those letters, we'll go up to the Create Motion Graphics Network, and I'll bring the options up for this. Now look at that, there's two different types. You have the old instancer type that's based on the particle instancer, and the more current, which is the default mesh type. We're gonna stick with the default for this, and we'll say apply. So what that does is that goes through and it starts to create my motion graphics network for me, and I need to change a few things to make this look the way I want. So the first thing I'm going to do is add an ID node on there so that each letter gets represented. Then we're going to go to the distribution. Instead of having them stacked out across the x-axis, what we're going to do is just put this over to initial state. So now we've got our logo set up and ready to begin animation using some of these procedural nodes. And for simplicity, we'll just use the signal node, and we'll animate that guy using the 4D noise. So I'll just kind of crank this up a little bit and give it some character. So we've got this object sort of rocking around, and it looks pretty cool. It's kind of fun. So what we want to do is we want to get this into Unreal. Now, how are we going to do that? Well, right now what this is this is a single mesh that's being animated using the motion graphics toolset, and it's basically like a component level animation. If we want to get a single mesh or vertice level animation into Unreal out of Maya, we can do that with Alembic caches. It's really straightforward. Just go up to the cache menu, go to Alembic cache, export selected to Alembic. I've got my time set to 1 to 100, and we'll just say export selection, and we'll overwrite this fun ABC, which is in my Unreal project. So we'll go ahead and we'll say that. It goes through, it processes it out. And now what we've done is we've created a version of this, and I'll just import that Alembic back in, that is basically just a simple node, a simple piece of geometry that's now being animated at the vert level. So there's no longer, the gray one that's on top isn't using the motion graphics toolset to drive it anymore. It's just vertice animation. And that will come into Unreal beautifully. Also things like cloth simulations or fluid simulations, those are all things that you could bring into Unreal using the Alembic cache. So we'll go ahead and we'll delete that. So the next way of getting data over to Unreal is to bring it in the form of transformations, like XYZ scale, movement, and rotation, things like that, at the level of each individual letter. Now you'll notice that this is obviously just one object. How do I get it to become back to letters that are being moved with transformations? It's actually very simple to do with a couple of utilities inside of the Mesh drop-down menu. So what we've got here is we made this using the mesh type, and that's why it's called VR4 Repo Mesh. If I want to, I can convert this to instance objects. So if you go here and you say, notice that there's two commands here. There's bake to instance object. That's great. I didn't make instance objects. So you'd think, oh man, I did the wrong type of geometry. What am I going to do? You know what you're going to do? You're just going to use the switch mesh geometry type. So as soon as you run the switch mesh geometry type, you actually have to select the mesh waiter node. And we'll go ahead and run that utility. So we'll say switch the geometry. So now instead of having that mesh, I've now got an instancer. It's actually pretty straightforward. So now we've got instance objects for each one of those individual letters that we originally selected. So now we can go back with the instancer highlighted and run the command to, and I'm going to set my range to 100 here because I don't want to bake this out too far. We're going to say utilities, bake instancer to objects. Very straightforward. We're going to tell it to use, this is all great, so we'll say bake animation. So it's going to go through and process this out. And when it's done, I'm going to have geometry that's now animated at the transformation node level as opposed to the cache one that was done at the vertice level. So two completely different workflows. They both go into Unreal beautifully, and we'll see that in just a second. So what we've got here is that's the instancer. We'll go ahead and we'll hide that. With that hidden, we can go in here and expand this out. So these are all of my objects. So we can just go ahead and grab those guys and hit the H key to unhide those. And if we play this back now, what do we have? We've got animation that is, if I highlight one letter here, all animated at the transformation node level. Very, very easy, very straightforward. So now we can take this and we can just export this out to Unreal. So you'll just say export to Unreal selected. Pretty straightforward there. And we'll call it, I don't know. Fun logo anim. All right, so we'll save that guy out. And it just exports out an FBX file for us. So pretty straightforward. So with that done, we can jump into Unreal. So here we are inside of Unreal. we're going to bring in our first type, which is that cache. So we'll just say file import. We'll bring in fun ABC. So when this comes in, there's a couple things you want to switch. You want to make sure that the geometry type is set to cache geometry. And I'm going to recompute the normals because I forgot what I set those guys on. So this will go through. And now we can just drag and drop this into our scene and just kind of spin that guy around and translate it forward a little bit, kind of get him hanging out over here, maybe just scale it up just because it's a little small. Cool. And a couple things we want to switch on this guy, just to make sure that running is turned on. And if we're set to simulate, which we are, you hit play, and there you go. There's Journey to VR inside of Unreal, brought in via an Alembic cache. So again, things like cloth simulations, fluids, transformation level, vertice level animation coming across that way. So pretty straightforward. So let's check out importing in the other file, which was done through FBX. So we'll go ahead and we'll bring that in. So the couple of things that are important here. Skeletal mesh has to be turned on. If this isn't turned on, you do not have the option to bring in the animation. So make sure that skeletal mesh is turned on and import animation is turned on. So we'll import that in. It's going to go through and take just a second to generate the shading networks. And what we want to do is drag and drop in not the static mesh, but the actual animation sequence. So if we drag that animation sequence in and just kind of pull that guy forward a little bit here, and we hit simulate, you can see that we now have animation brought into Unreal from Maya that was animated using the motion graphics toolset in two different ways. So pretty straightforward. Hopefully you guys understood it and it makes sense to you guys. Thanks so much for watching Journey to VR. I'm having so much fun to do it. If you're watching this on YouTube or Vimeo, please make sure you go back to the area Journey to VR section. We have lots of other videos that I've recorded, as well as many, many articles that have been written, customer interviews, tons and tons of content on there that we've been documenting along our journey. So again, thank you so much for checking it out, everybody. Cheers.